What's up, everyone? My name is Matthew Dale, and I am here to help you play better, sound great, and understand more. And I'm going to be back in the Fractal ecosystem for this video, and I'm going to talk about 4 excellent CPU savers. We've all been in that situation where we just need a little bit of extra CPU power or CPU headroom to make the preset that we want to make. So I'm going to talk about 4 CPU savers that I use all the time, but spoiler alert, I'm not going to talk about the ones that you've probably heard of, namely the reverb quality and the cab quality. And I'm going to show you why I'm not going to focus on that. Those are really great CPU savers, but let's take the cab block, for example. I'm using the new Dynacabs. So the new Dynacabs just have been released for all 3 of our devices, the Axe-Fx, FM3, FM9. But on the Dynacabs, you cannot select the quality on the FM9 or the FM3. You can on the Axe-Fx. So unlike if I go to channel B here, which is just our regular IRs, I could move this from, if it was on ultra-res, to standard. That would save some CPU, but we're going to talk about some other ones. On the reverb side as well, this is set to ultra high quality. One thing that's really interesting about the FM9 is it actually has a dedicated reverb CPU. So even if I move this quality from ultra high to economy, you can see this preset, which we're going to pare down, is at 71%. If I go to economy, it's not really doing much because of that dedicated CPU. So that's not going to be a great trick specifically for the FM9 or the FM9 Turbo. So let's take a look at how to drastically reduce this preset from over 70% down to a significantly less number. Let me show you what I got going on here. I've got 4 scenes, a clean, a rhythm, and a lead, and then kind of this ambient thing going on. So right now, I've got one of my favorites, my Matchbox D30, going through some Dynacabs. This is the Dyna Chief cabinet. I've got a condenser and a ribbon, hard pan left and right, and I've got this sound right now. This is on the neck pickup split on my PRS 594. Lovely, beautiful amplifier. I dialed this in with, actually, I dialed this in a long time ago because this is a part of my block library. If you want to get some great tone, like really, really fast, I mean ridiculously fast, then you should download my block library. I've got the Matchbox D30 like this called in, along with all of these other great amplifiers that I use all the time. And with the new Dynacabs, I've got Dynacabs up here. So if you have updated to the latest firmware, there's my Dyna Chief. I've also got all these other Dynacabs along with my other standard great IRs that I use all the time. So head down to matthewdale.com/blocks or hit the link in the description box below and you can download my block library for yourself. I'm going to flip over to the bridge pickup on the drive side of things. So my drive scene here, I am using the AC booster. And then I've got a lead scene that introduces the, I'm reaching for my FM9 over there. I am using the RC booster to boost the amp a little bit more, and then I've got a filter block to increase the level. And there's my lead tone. I'm also going through some multi-tap delay, also dialed in using my block library. This is also going through a lovely South Church reverb, hooked up in parallel. On the ambient scene, I flip gears over to the Plex delay, also have the multi-tap delay in there for some added ambience, a la this type sound. Lovely ambient goodness. I've got a pitch block that's doing a little bit of detune on both sides, just for that extra little studio pizzazz, and then a compressor just to really kind of even out all of the tones, even out the volume. This is kind of like my studio compressor trick that I do after the amp and cab. It's really just kind of like the instant better button. Let me bypass it. Here's what it sounds like without. And on. Really nice. Let me go to my clean tone and play a little bit of some clean lead things. And now with the compressor and instant better. And not just that slight increase in volume, although that's good, but it is evening out those playing dynamics, which can really be nice for going live. So I have copied this entire preset over here to the next preset slot. I changed the name on it to low CPU. Let's pare down on this to make this a much more efficient preset. And the number one thing, the first tip that I have for you to decrease the CPU usage is to get rid of blocks, especially excess blocks. However, we don't want to sacrifice tone, right? So what can we do? And right now, what we're going to focus on are these two drive blocks. These are pretty thirsty when it comes to CPU. And because of how fully featured our amp block is, these are kind of in excess. We don't really need certainly two drive blocks here. I'm actually not going to use either of them, and I'm going to get some very, very similar tones out of it. So let's just take the RC booster for a second. Gain is really low. Level is just boosting the amp a little bit. We can do this work in our preamp tab. Let's do the preamp boost type. Let's do the RC booster. And let's just crank this up just a little bit, 13, 14. And here it is. I'm going to go back to my bridge pickup. Here it is with the RC booster by itself. And then off. Now with the preamp boost on the amplifier. Now watch this. I'm going to leave this on. I am going to shunt this off, and let's take a look at the CPU drop from 71 to 63, right? So I can utilize all of the fully featured things in our amp block to get rid of one of the blocks. Now that only kicks on my lead scene. So I am going to assign this to a control switch. And where are you? There you are. And let's go ahead and go over to our controllers, control switch per scene. Let's set these all to off, and then scene 3, let's set this to on. So that way, just like with my other scenes here, so here's clean, and then drive, and then when I go to my lead scene, it pops on. And then I've got my lead boost there. Here's another excess block that we can get rid of. Although I really like the filter block as just a very low CPU, clean level boost. I got this one going up 2 dB. Sometimes it's also kind of needless, and if you're really, really paring down for CPU, let's just do this with our scene. So let's get rid of this and shunt this out, and let's go to our output block. I only had it coming on the lead scene, so let's go down to scene levels. Scene 3 is my lead scene. Let's boost it up by 2 dB, and now I've got another 1%, but sometimes 1% does matter. 1% of CPU saved there. Now, tip number 2, scene controllers save lives. Well, maybe not save lives, but they can definitely save on some CPU and make some of these other blocks irrelevant. Let's take this drive block, for example. So what I'm doing here, this is kind of a carryover from if we're thinking about an analog signal chain. One of the things that has always been popular, definitely like several years ago, was the elusive transparent overdrive. It just gives me more of the amp. And I've definitely had pedals on my pedal board to do this. And that can kind of carry over into this digital world. But we've actually got, if I want more amp, so here's my clean bridge pickup again. Here's my drive to give me a little more amp. A little bit of a mid-range bump in there as well. Well, if I want more amp, why don't I just dial in more amp? So right now, my gain is on just under 4. If I increase this to right around 7, there is more of my amp, and I think actually that drive tone sounds maybe a little bit better than the drive tone from the drive block. So we're going to use scene controllers to automate this. So let me go up here. Let's do a modifier and scene controller. Let's do number 1. And the minimum was just under 4. So we'll set that up. I really wish you could type in on these, like double click and type in, but you can't. Fractal, if you're listening, let's add that in as a feature, please. And then we're right around 7 or so on the max. And I'm doing this with the min and max values so that when I go over, also aside, let's do linear and let's just do a little bit of an easy ramp going from drive to clean. So now 3 and 7. On the controllers, this makes it easier for me, scene controller 1 or 2, 1 and 2, this makes it easier for me to not really think about the percentages too much. I can just increase, I want that drive pedal on, scenes 2 and 3. That makes this irrelevant. Let's get it out. We'll shunt this out, and we drop another, almost 10% there. So now we're down to 55%. That's really good, but we're not done with scene controllers, because if we take a look at the reverb block and the plex delay block, the way that I'm using these, and the way that I've done this in presets in the past, is utilizing 2 blocks to give me 2 different flavors of reverb. But reverb is pretty thirsty, and the plex delay is pretty thirsty. So what exactly is going on here if I go back to these scenes? So reverb is giving me, the reverb block is giving me this very just, kind of subtle reverb tone. If I go into number 4, scene number 4. So I've got a longer tail, and I've got a little bit more level from the reverb, and of course I got the multi-tap delay in there, but that's separate. So I'm going to use scene controllers to do the things that the plex delay is doing in the reverb block. So let's get this guy out of here. Let's turn this guy back on for our ambient scene, and I'm going to put a scene controller on the level. Let's do scene controller number 2. And the minimum level that I want is right around -15, so we will get that in there. And let's do right around -9 or so. Maybe we'll do -8. We'll see how that sounds. Yeah, let's do another damping trick, so just a nice, easy ramp, especially on the release. Bring the release right around like 1,000 milliseconds or so. And now, between the 2 scenes, if I go back and set that up, so scene controller number 2, 0, number 4 is going to be all the way on. If we take a look at this, here is my clean scene, and here is the ambient scene. Let me get a little bit more reverb time as well on this. So let's do this same scene controller. We can stack these. So right around 3 or so seconds was the first lower reverb setting. Let's increase it to right around 7 or 8 seconds. I don't want it crazy. 8 seconds. 8, almost 9 seconds. Let's try that. And we can leave that stuff alone. I think that'll be fine. Now, because I already have the scene controller set up, this should actually just update automatically, and we can see that it does. And let's hear what this sounds like now. Here's just my clean and reverb with scene controllers. Pretty addictive sound to kind of mess around with. I really like that. So, and now we dropped, we're down at like 41%. We dropped 30% by getting rid of some of these excess blocks that we may not need. Now, tip number 3, if you are really squeezed for CPU, get rid of all of your shunts. So we can actually, there's a lot of space on the grid that we're not using and we don't need to use. All of these shunts do account for a little bit of CPU. So if I just drag these and reconsolidate my preset here, something like this parallel stack, if you just click on this square, you can drag this guy all the way in to make that a little bit easier. And now let's connect our virtual cables back up and get rid of all of our excess shunts that we don't need. We'll see how this affects our CPU usage. And there we go. Again, another subtle one, we're dropping just about 1%, but sometimes, like I said, sometimes that percent does matter if you're really tipping the scales between 80 and 85%. Now for tip number 4, I'm going to be subbing out the pitch block. If we take a look at what's going on in the pitch block, I've got it hard panned left and right with a little bit of detune and a little bit of delay on both sides. And what we're going to be doing is subbing the pitch block out for a delay block. And this is a really good tip if you like the sound of like a stereo detune, but are, really tipping the scales on CPU, you can sub this out. So rather than the pitch block, let's go over to the delay block, and I'm just going to call in the digital mono. Now you can see now we've dropped to 34.8%. Here's how I'm going to address the dual pitch thing in the delay block. Let's go to the modulation section. Let's increase this modulation on LFO1 to about 40% or so. Let's go back here. I'm going to do like a slapback double tracker thing, so 50 milliseconds on the time and a little bit of right post delay. This is going to give me that stereo width that I want, that I was getting out of the pitch block. And now I've got this. And let's bring this back to, let's try 23%. And we can hear that stereo-ness is coming back in, maybe 20%. So now check this out. We were at like 71, 72%, and we've cut our CPU more than a half. We are at a comfortable 34.8%. Let's just make sure that all of our tones are definitely in the ballpark. I'm going to play each of our settings. Let's go ahead and hit save on this so that, we're not affecting anything, bouncing back and forth between the presets. Here is my clean. I'm going to stay on the neck pickup for this, and we'll hear both of these. Let's check out our drive on the bridge pickup. Here's our lead scene. And our ambient scene. So drop me a comment, let me know what you thought of this. I am going to put both of these presets up on my Patreon, so if you want to try these out for yourself, you can do that. Just find the link in the description box below. My name is Matthew Dale. Those were some great CPU saving tips to help you play better, sound great, and understand more. I will see you on the next video. Cheers.